Well, they're very similar actually. You know, it's uncanny. It's just that rugby, professional rugby, is perhaps a little bit more in the spotlight. There's no difference in managing your employees. You have succession plans to deal with. Your current employees, you have to look at their strengths and weaknesses, and perhaps very importantly is to provide them with feedback. You have to give them feedback on their performance, you know, how they're doing, and you have to monitor their performance as well. So setting targets and getting them to understand their job description is very, very important. So no different to business. Of course, they're exposed on the rugby field in rugby, and you get a chance to look at how they tackle, pass, run, how they do in their specific roles on the field. But again, you know, if you can relate that to business, you know, for example, there are people who push buttons, there are people who work a line, there are people who have to reach targets. There's all manner of things, and it's really no different to rugby. I don't think it's just the Ospreys. I think any rugby team, you know, when I coached Wales and even at Gloucester or school teams, then you know, you have in rugby a team of individuals, and it's very important to, if you're developing them and helping them learn new skills or to perform at their highest, that you understand their learning styles. So, you know, some people learn visually through audio means or kinesthetically, and so I think for me, what I've learned is that good leaders really care about their employees. They understand them, they get to know their backgrounds and what makes them tick. Plenty of examples, particularly the Ospreys. You know, having coached Gavin Henson after playing with his father, a prop forward from Pencoed, playing for my stake, you know, Gavin was a different animal, but a consummate professional, you know, very prepared, a great athlete, somebody that rugby came very easily to, but still, you know, his mentality and his psyche, his psychology was one that you had to get to know and understand. Gavin had to be 100% right in order to go on the field. He saw that as his stage, and he needed to be just right to perform. So, you know, boosting his ego, giving him confidence was a classic example. Justin Marshall, New Zealand's, you know, most ever capped All Blacks scrum half, a former captain of the All Blacks, came over to the Ospreys a real winner, but somebody who never liked being dropped or not picked or even dragged off the field, you know, and being substituted. So it was somebody that you had to get into. I had to play squash with Justin on his day off to really get into him and understand him and build up a rapport. So, you know, ages different, levels of maturity differ, you know, experience, and you have to take all of these into account when you're managing your workforce, which essentially is what a rugby team is. It's a good question. It's a very difficult one for professional coaches, professional managers in sport, particularly rugby union, to manage. The competitive season in the Northern Hemisphere, as you say, is a very arduous one. There's very little time off. In a club, in the Celtic nations, for example, you play in many different competitions. You know, as far as Welsh teams are concerned, like the Ospreys, you play in the Celtic League, you play in the Anglo-Welsh competition, you play in Europe, and of course the national team play at 3 different times in the year as well, in the autumn, the Six Nations, and then on a summer tour. So it's very difficult to manage, and your players and your coaches, your workforce can become very weary, they can become demotivated, tired. So you have to spice it up a little bit. And I think this is very important in business as well, with your employees and your workforce, that you have to develop a culture, develop your own language, you develop a synergy within your workforce, within your group. And at the Ospreys, we tried many things. You know, you can easily become embroiled in a mundane, day-to-day sort of you know, process, which becomes demotivating. So things like, you know, offering rewards, setting targets. We devised our own belt buckle, whereby it was a silver belt buckle that the player of the day got in the changing shed immediately after the game that the players chose, and they got to wear this special, unique Ospreys belt buckle and get to keep it, solid silver, sponsored by a local jeweller. And of course, every player was incentivized to get one of those then as well. Change up your week, you know, you have a bit of fun in your reviews, so you go to an old school day, or you change your training times, or you take them away for a break. Lots of different things like that. And of course, we then developed a language. We had a slogan when we developed some understanding of the osprey bird. What we found in our research, that when it mates for life. And if you think about it, when you play professional sport or you work a long time with somebody, you become mates for life. So there's a play on words there. So MFL became a very synonymous sort of hashtag, if you like, for us, and something that we could tie around and have a bit of a siege mentality with. So yeah, I think building your own culture, developing your environment, changing up your working week, spicing up a little bit is really important in keeping, when the dark times and the cold times come around, the bubble and squeak going. It's another good question. It's very difficult to sustain a level of performance right throughout, a calendar year or a rugby season, as it were. You're never going to peak all the way through, and it's difficult to peak. So, you got to be careful that you work with your departments and your inter-departments. For example, in rugby, it's your coaching department, your conditioning department, your medical, and then your off-field team, your team management, and the community and sponsors and your stakeholders. And if you're all understanding of what you're trying to achieve, you have some sort of level to go back to. I think during the disappointments and the dark times with the Ospreys, it was all about taking stock and going back to your true values, having a look at your baseline and going back to the nuts and bolts of what you're trying to achieve. So things like your set piece, your defence and your kicking game would be the tactical and technical specifics. And you get those fundamentals right, and by and large your process is going to be okay and the results will come again. Again, motivation plays a huge part of this. So rotating your squad, giving different players, different employees, if you like, different roles, and changing the environment up a little bit. And of course the biggest thing for all businesses, I suppose, is managing the expectations, not just of perhaps the people within the environment, but outside. As far as rugby goes, your fans, your sponsors, and of course managing upwards to people like the board and the chief executive. So keeping them informed, keeping the statistical data out there, and sending positive messages that you can control and set the agenda to ensure that people are far more up to speed with what it is you're trying to achieve. Well, when I finished at the Ospreys after nearly 10 years and after 16 years of professional rugby coaching, the BBC asked me to go along and do some work for them around games, Celtic rugby games. And I found myself being a bit of an analyst to rugby games, during live games, reviewing games, in the studio, and learning a lot more about the public and the media. And I've also picked up a role as hosting a radio show, a rugby radio show, the only one of its kind in Wales. So I'm learning the broadcasting fundamentals, learning the hard way, but I'm enjoying it. And that's taken me to a different stratosphere in terms of my brand and my profile, and I'm enjoying that. Also, I'm doing some writing, so I'm still keeping close to the game. I'm having to analyse all of the games, and as you rightly say, keeping my hand in on a consultancy coaching basis, where I'm coaching teams like Romania. Local clubs ask me to go along, and I do a bit of work for them. And I coach the coach as well. I do a lot of coach development and coach education, which I really enjoy. I think that coaching is a fraternity. We should share. We should learn from each other, and I really enjoy, taking that out there to whether it's young developing coaches or current professional coaches, and bouncing off one another. So it's quite a diverse range of things I'm doing at the moment. I'm still only 42. I'm happy to get back into elite coaching at some point, but for now, I'm enjoying new skills and new challenges.